Disclaimer: this video is a historical documentary created for educational purposes. All scenes are artistic reenactments based on documented events. No real violence is shown or promoted. Show my head to the people. It is well worth seeing. Those were the audacious last words of Georges Danton, a titan of the French Revolution, and he said them to the very man about to execute him. This was a man who had rallied a nation, a voice that had toppled a monarchy. So how did he end up on the wrong side of the guillotine, condemned by the very revolution he helped create? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. Before the revolution, Georges-Jacques Danton was a little-known lawyer from a respectable but not wealthy family. He moved to Paris in 1780, started a legal practice, and threw himself into the city's vibrant intellectual life. He had an immense presence. His face was scarred from childhood run-ins with farm animals and smallpox, and his voice was a thundering force that captivated anyone who listened. That raw, magnetic charisma would soon find its moment. When revolution broke out in 1789, Danton dove right into the chaos. He became a regular at the Radical Cordelier Club, a hotbed for revolutionary ideas, where his powerful speeches quickly earned him the nickname the Thunderer. While he wasn't there for the initial storming of the Bastille, he soon became a leader of the local militia. His voice was a constant engine for political action, pushing the working-class people of Paris toward a new way of thinking. Danton was a pragmatist, a master of seizing the moment. His influence skyrocketed after the king, Louis XVI, tried to flee France in 1791. Danton, like many others, saw this as an act of treason, and it pushed his politics even further to the left. He became a key figure in the movement to overthrow the monarchy entirely. On August 10, 1792, Danton was central to the attack on the Tuileries Palace, the king's home. In the wild aftermath, with the monarchy gone, he was named Minister of Justice. From this position, he held enormous power, arguably more than the king he had just helped get rid of. He helped establish the First French Republic, becoming one of the architects of a brand new France. He was at the very heart of the revolution, a man who seemed to embody its raw, chaotic, and world-changing energy. But revolutions are hungry. By 1793, the young French Republic was in serious trouble. It was facing war from the monarchies of Europe and dealing with counter-revolutionary plots and civil unrest from within. In this climate of fear and crisis, the government looked for a radical solution. Danton himself had argued for it, declaring, "Let us be terrible, to prevent the people from being so." That thinking led directly to two of the revolution's most frightening creations. The first was the Revolutionary Tribunal, set up in March 1793. It was a court designed to prosecute enemies of the Republic with brutal speed. The second, created just a month later, was the Committee of Public Safety, an executive body that would quickly grab almost dictatorial power. Ironically, Danton was instrumental in creating both and even served as the first president of the committee. These institutions became the engine of the Reign of Terror. At first, the terror was aimed at clear enemies of the state, royalists, foreign spies, and armed rebels. But the definition of an enemy started to get wider and wider. Under the growing influence of Maximilien Robespierre, a man obsessed with his own abstract idea of a republic of virtue, the terror ramped up. Robespierre believed that virtue could and should be forced upon society. Anyone who didn't meet his rigid standards or who just disagreed with his methods was a potential traitor. The guillotine, once a tool for protecting the Republic, was becoming a weapon for getting rid of political rivals. What started as a desperate move to defend the nation was turning into a bloody campaign of ideological purity. Danton, the man who had once called for a terrible government, started having second thoughts. After his first wife died, he briefly stepped away from politics in late 1793, heading to his country home. But as the terror spun out of control, he was urged to return to Paris. He came back a different man, convinced the revolution was starting to eat itself alive. He found an ally in his friend, the journalist Camille Desmoulins. Together, they launched a newspaper called Le Vieux Cordelier, or The Old Cordelier. The paper was a direct attack on the excesses of the terror. At first, Robespierre actually supported it, thinking it was a good way to attack his own rivals on the far left. But Desmoulins, with Danton's support, soon took a wider aim. He used Roman history to draw parallels, warning how republics can slide into tyranny, and started to openly criticize the Committee of Public Safety itself. Danton began publicly calling for the terror to end. He pushed for a committee of clemency and a policy of moderation, believing the Republic was now strong enough to loosen its grip. This put him on a direct collision course with Robespierre. For Robespierre, Danton's call for moderation wasn't just a political disagreement, it was a betrayal of the revolution's core principles. It was a sign of moral weakness and, therefore, treason. The friendship and alliance between the two giants of the revolution was broken. Robespierre, who for months had resisted calls to arrest Danton, now had to choose his former friend or his vision of a perfect, virtuous republic. Virtue, as Robespierre saw it, was going to win. In the early morning of March 30th, 1794, the order came down. Georges Danton, along with Camille Desmoulins and other allies, was arrested. The charges were a mix of political poison, conspiracy against the Republic, royalist sympathies, and most damaging of all, financial corruption. Now, the corruption charges weren't completely made up. Danton was known for living large and had faced accusations of financial misconduct before, though nothing was ever proven. He seemed to have mysterious sources of money and had bought a lot of property. But the timing of the arrest made the real motive obvious. Danton wasn't arrested for being a thief. He was arrested for being a threat. He was the most powerful person arguing for an end to the terror, and in Robespierre's world, that made him a counter-revolutionary. When one of his supporters in the National Convention demanded that Danton be allowed to speak and defend himself, Robespierre personally shut it down. He argued it would be violating the laws of impartiality to grant to Danton what was refused to others. The trap was sprung. The man who was once the most powerful figure in the Republic was now just another prisoner, stripped of his voice and his influence, on a one-way trip to the revolutionary tribunal he had helped create. He was officially declared an enemy of the Republic and sent to a trial where the verdict was already decided. The trial began on April 2nd, 1794, and it was a total spectacle. Danton may have been stripped of his power, but not of his booming voice or his defiance. He turned the courtroom into his final stage. The crowds that packed the courthouse were proof of his lasting popularity, and he gave them one last show. When the judge asked for his name and where he lived, Danton thundered back, "My residence." Soon the great void. My name, in the pantheon of history. He refused to play the part of a defeated prisoner. He raged against the sham proceedings, his voice booming with the same patriotic fire that had once rallied armies. He demanded that witnesses be called, certain he could tear apart the flimsy accusations. His defense was so powerful, so fierce, that the prosecutors and judges started to panic. They were terrified he might actually win over the crowd, that his legendary oratory skills could snatch him from the jaws of the guillotine. To stop that from happening, his enemies in the convention passed a new, custom-made decree. It stated that any prisoner who showed a want of respect for justice could be kicked out of their own trial. It was a legal trick designed for one reason: to silence Georges Danton. When the decree was read in court, Danton knew the fight was over. "I will no longer defend myself," he cried out. "Let me be led to death. I shall go to sleep in glory." The trial was a farce. On April 5th, the guilty verdict was read to an empty bench. Danton and the other defendants had already been dragged from the room. On that same day, April 5th, 1794, Danton was loaded into a cart with 14 others and taken to the Place de la Révolution. He was defiant to the very end. While his friend Camille Desmoulins was a mess, Danton kept a cool composure that even the executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, would later remember with awe. He was the last of his group to die. He watched his friends and allies go before him, one by one. As he climbed the steps of the scaffold, he walked past another condemned man, Hérault de Seychelles, and tried to embrace him. When the guard stopped him, Danton scoffed, "Fools! You cannot prevent our heads from kissing in the basket." Then he turned to the executioner. In the fading daylight, as the crowd watched in stunned silence, he made his final magnificent demand. "Show my head to the people," he commanded. "It is well worth seeing." With those words, the blade fell, but Danton's death created a power vacuum and a wave of fear that ultimately consumed his rival. Just 3 months later, Robespierre himself would follow the same path to the guillotine. Danton's last words cemented his legend as a man too large, too passionate, and too defiant for even the revolution to contain. He was a hero and a victim, an architect of the Republic, and a casualty of its terror, a flawed, thunderous man whose final command has echoed through history. What do you think? Was Danton a corrupt politician who got what he deserved, or a hero trying to save the revolution from itself? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about the titans of history, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this one.